Welcome to the Workplace Ninja Netherlands podcast, a series on Microsoft's modern workplace management.
So welcome at the third one in the Workplace Ninjas Workplace Management series. And this time we're gonna have it about
basic policies.
Basic policies. So last time we ended with autopilot.
Yep.
So we have the complete configuration completed so we can enroll devices. Devices are active in our tenants. And then we need to do some configuration on it. So let's talk about that. But first, we have a new Workplace Ninja Saturday that we have announced today. We are recording this on Friday. And we announced that today on... When was it, Kenneth?
It will be held on Saturday the 8th of April. And we will be... the company Fastlane will actually host it, and they are a learning provider. During that day, we will have hands-on labs, and actually will be able to do a little bit more deep dive into technology together with, of course, the Workplace Ninja team and, of course, our visitors.
Yeah, and the topic for that day is more or less security, I guess.
It will be mainly security-focused, security related, but also to mingle, discuss with your peers and
absolutely
things like that. Yeah.
So that is the Workplace Ninja Saturday here in the Netherlands, and the next meetup that we have that's in the community day. We're organizing that together with a few other communities.
Yeah.
Wortel is hosting the location, sponsoring that sort of things. And so all the communities will come together. That is on the 13th of April.
Yeah, that's the week after. I think on a Thursday
evening.
Yeah. So, but more information on that soon.
Yeah, and that's available on Meetup. So if you want to be on our local meetups in the Netherlands and you are there, you can register yourself on meetup/WPNinjasNL.
Indeed, yeah. And for the people actually already member of our meetup, they will also be included into our newsletter with all the detailed information on where and when things happen.
Yeah, and if you are listening or viewing this webcast/podcast, please subscribe yourself on the different channels, especially on YouTube. Sign the notification, a thumbs up, and you will be announced if there is a new video or podcast online. Please do that. Help us with feedback so we can improve on our side. The topic for this recording, already said, basic policies. Joost, what do we need to do if we have enrolled the workplace and need to do the next steps, so to say?
You want to figure out what you want to set. What are going to be your basic policies? What is your security layer going to be? What kind of stuff do you need to configure for your users, like Office, OneDrive maybe? And that kind of stuff. So how can you help your users to get in their working situation as fast as possible?
Yeah, is there only a user configuration or do we need some other security stuff as well?
I would say some other security stuff as well. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Before diving into this topic, Erik, the last time the first two recordings we have done that with Peter on the table. Now you're joining. You are servicing a lot of customers, but there are mainly small customers. What are the first steps that you are realizing for customers when it comes to some sort of basic policies? What are the key differences probably for enterprises as well?
Because we manage multiple different customers, it's very good to have a good naming convention. So if that every tenant looks like you manage themselves, dus a naming convention is the first step to take. But maybe you already discussed that in further. But So I'm not that experienced as Peter, of course, in Intune. My focus is more on security. And also naming convention and what to do where. Because one of my problems with Intune is you have a security baseline, you have the endpoint security, you have session catalogs, and you have the configuration policies. In all 4 steps, I can define and configure BitLocker, for example. But then you get many conflicts. So first, what are you going to do in which part of Intune? Because you have this convention if you work together, because I'm not the only one who's servicing all those customers. So name a convention and what to do in which part, and then you can think of, okay, what are we going to configure then? And keep it, make a small set of policies that you can use on every customer, so that you not have tailor-made configuration on every customer. So that's my first step, what I'm going to do. Before typing a type code or configure or clicking in the GUI, make some conventions together where to do what, because it's always changing in Intune. So that's a gift. Yeah. So if you're not working like a structure, you end up in a complete mess with hundreds of different settings and configurations, not supportable, not manageable. Customers may be very happy, but it's going out of the hands.
Yeah. You're noting a few interesting topics. Joost, maybe you as a co-host, you can write something, some pieces down, so we do not forget that at the end. The first thing that where you triggered me, that was BitLocker can be realized in the security baseline, in a config policy, in a security policy, on all different kind of ways that you can use to set the BitLocker environment. And maybe we can discuss that a little bit later on. But in the next few recordings, we will dive more or less deeper into the security baselines and into the settings catalog. So we will have a specific recording for that once. But maybe it's good. It's also good to discuss what things we configure in some way. What do we first, and what's next? So maybe it's good to have a discussion on that later on. First, Kenneth, basic policies. In your Erik was already telling what is on his mind regarding basic policies, what the first steps he needs to do at smaller customers. But regarding enterprise customers, what are we doing first?
For me, it actually starts with applying the security baselines first. So, as already been said, Microsoft within Intune provides some security baselines, which you can actually apply directly on your endpoints. And those security baselines actually contain a whole set of default settings, default security configuration, which you can apply as a whole to all your devices. There are some challenges there, but starting with the security baselines is, if you would ask me, a good starting point. And on top of that, you can always decide to create deviations or specific configuration policies to build the modern workplace for your customer. And that can also contain some customer-specific configuration from there. But if you would ask me, I would always start with the security baselines first and use that as the basis to build your own custom solutions on top of that.
Yeah, so let's in the next recording we will dive in into the security baseline specific.
Yeah.
So that will be the next recording. We will shuffle a little bit. So settings catalog will be after that one. So the next one we will do on security baselines. Erik is here, so he can discuss as well on that. But first, the config policies. You already mentioned, Joost, the OneDrive config, for example, the first run for some specific applications. Can you explain that a little bit more?
Yeah. What we want to do for our users who are running on the laptop for the first time, we want to set them as fast as possible up to get their starting point. So what we want to do is use OneDrive known folders for setting up their device. If it's being stolen or being defective, they're up and running fast as possible. And it's more secure because everything is in the cloud at OneDrive. So that's a basic policy. We like to do it via the settings catalog. So that's the newer form of the policies to set. Next step is the Office, the configuration like email, Outlook configuration that's going to be automatically, no wizards for the users, but configure them automatically. And that's the basics. And that's to help those users to get up and running as fast as possible.
If we look at current environments, and we probably have lots of group policies active and so on. Are we migrating all that group policies into settings catalog, security baselines, or normal config policies?
Please not. No.
Why not?
No, while I do understand that Microsoft is providing means to import your current group policies and actually translate them to settings catalog, etc. We shouldn't forget that in most companies the current state of their group policies is like their total investment in group policies since the start of Active Directory, where some group policies have no meaning anymore, and you should always revisit that. So I'm actually not in favor of using your current group policies in a modern workplace setup. For some things it's necessary, but I would always try to translate that into a modern workplace setup and do something from there. On the other hand, I do fully understand why Microsoft is now actually making some efforts in helping customers to import their current group policies. But again, that wouldn't be my first suggestion to start with when it comes to migrating customers to a modern workplace.
Yeah. So
I totally agree on that.
Yeah. What Kenneth is saying is you've got some group policy analytics in Intune. You can import those group policies as well. What we like to use it for is for an inventory tool. So what is the setup right now? Are we going to miss something when we're onboarding the modern workplace? So we use it for inventory on other environments like environments, or when we're coming from Citrix or another VDI solution to get them onboarded to a modern workplace. Yeah,
but it's not. It's more or less for doing some inventory to know what is happening in an organization to see what is needed on a new workplace. But what Kenneth said, the new workplace needs to be reinvented. So it's a new approach. So probably not everything will be migrated into cloud management in basic policies, for example.
Right. First step in the analytics is you're going to import the GPO you want to import. Then you can, what you can see is then how much percentage is going to be capable of running into Intune, and then you create a full policy of it. But the last step, we don't use it for.
Yeah. And what are the things that we want to use in a modern approach, so to say? So the first run of OneDrive for Outlook, for example, there are basic stuff that we want to keep into into an Intune policy. Are there for you, Eric? Are there any topics that you say that is what I see at most customers? So we take that into a few sort of configurations to make that happen for our customers.
Yeah. We also we have two kind of policies. We see security policies and we see productivity policies. What Joost said is productivity policies, for example. We also have a third one. This is not a policy. It's communication with the customer. Like you said, reinvent. Modern workplace is a modern way of working. Like normally you had the home drive and you have offline files and you had the file shares. It's SharePoint. It's OneDrive. So all those group policies, I totally agree with Kenneth. You don't need them anymore in the new. If you're going to adopt the complete new way of working, and that's my idea. Go also implement a new way of working. Don't because if you keep on working like you did, don't migrate to modern workplace. You're not solving any problems.
Then it's not needed to have a new
why?
workplace. So
it's not going to give the extra productivity you wanted. But what we always do is also pre-populating the default SharePoint links. Like you normally have the file share, you can also say, give me that SharePoint links. And then we have an ongoing internal discussion. Are we going to do that with OneDrive links or going to using the sync? They have two different options. Both have advantage, and we have two camps in our company, the left and the right. But there's no consensus. That's also a thing. How are you going to how are going to sync the libraries to your account with link in the OneDrive? You can also migrate him when you have a new laptop, but there are also complications with it. So. That's productivity tool, and of course Windows Hello for Business, all that kind of default security you want to have set up, passwordless, all that kind of identity things. It's also integrated in your device, how to set up your mobile. For Outlook productivity, it's not only the laptop, that's modern work. It's not only the laptop, it's also the mobile and your online identity and your password. So the complete onboarding of a customer is not give the laptop, log in, enter. No, it's all those devices need to be compliant, and that's more complicated than it was before. So the Wi-Fi settings on all devices, if you want to, all the applications, the latest versions, of course. So it's really hard to get it every time working. For once, it's for a project, it's okay. But then after 3 months, having the same experience, that's the hardest part of the modern workplace and keep everything up to date. So that's the idea of the policies, what we do, and keep in track with the customer if that SharePoint library, what was a good idea 6 months ago, is it still a good idea to pre-populate that specific library, or are there 3 new teams which also need to be populated? So keep on track of that. That's, for me, the hardest part. Not the onboarding first. If in a project it will work, but then it becomes and keep it up to date with all the new policies and baseline. That's the hardest part, I think, of a modern workplace. I discover now.
Yeah, and basic policies in this area. We're talking about the configuration policies within Intune.
Indeed, yeah, we do. And again, also in the concept of modern workplace, where in the old world we would actually restrict as much as possible for the end users. It's now more a matter of making it more easier for end users to do so. For example, by configuring OneDrive, pre-configuring OneDrive, for example. While on a modern workplace, users can do that themselves, but then they need to go into the settings. They need to click on the button that their folders should be backed up. And what we are doing within the configuration profiles, we actually automate that part for them, making sure that their files are, of course, backed. That's important. But I think the most important thing is that if users want to do things differently themselves, we should enable them to do that as well. So not...
if it's for the user more productive for them.
Indeed, yeah. And not every modern workplace is the same. Deviations can happen because we give more freedom to the end users. Yeah. While we see that in more the traditional IT, we had all kinds of similar workstations which were all configured evenly, and where actually users didn't have the option to even modify their desktop background. Yeah. So it's a whole other way of thinking about how to manage the device, and that's something that we can accomplish by using the configuration profiles.
Yeah, last week we had a discussion about the kiosk devices. Is that something we are realizing in because it's already part of the settings catalog in my thoughts? But are we still configuring that through config policies?
Yeah.
But why? Because it's already part of the settings catalog.
Yeah. In the end, every configuration takes place by using the configuration service providers. So if you actually know the language underneath, you can configure anything that's possible through the configuration service providers. The difference is actually that in the portal, sometimes it's called an administrative template, then it's called a security baseline. The other thing is then it's a settings catalog again. But in the end, it's all the same configurations landing on the device itself. So it's not like the settings catalog is configuring like another setting on the endpoint compared to a custom OMA URI setting.
It's on a different place, but it's doing the same underwater.
Indeed,
it's doing same stuff.
We know now that we are migrating towards everything in the settings catalog.
Yeah.
But in the meantime, customers have chosen to use administrative templates in the past. And of course, Microsoft needs to give those people some time to migrate those policies into the settings catalog in the end.
And if we are going complete to the basics, the basics, then we need to configure a custom config policy and set up the OMA URI.
Yeah, in some cases, when new functionality is released, the only way to do is to use the custom policies. Up until Microsoft comes with a settings catalog update, having the features in a more graphical, better way.
Yeah. Are there still OMA URIs that you're using, Just?
At this moment, no.
So Microsoft is doing a good job having all the things that our customers need.
Sometimes you need them, but for now we don't need them because we're on top of it. But I think maybe in the near future we're going to have some OMA URIs as well.
Yeah, last time
I have an example. We recently implemented some deployment rings for our updates for Microsoft Defender, which were only able to be set using custom OMA URIs. So there we still need to use that option.
There was a regarding?
Well, the whole idea of not having all the clients update at the same time due to Armageddon and all kinds of stuff. Yeah.
And one question: you have the configuration profiles, you have the OMA URI. It's and then you have the configuration policy. What's the use case of the session catalog? Is that why should you use? Because we are IT, so we want to configure everything on our own. Well, when to use configuration policy, or is it the policy? Is it nowadays if it can do in the session catalog, do it in the catalog, or why is that? Why do you want to do that?
Yeah, so the session catalog, the whole idea of the session catalog is that it should reflect everything that can be set using custom OMA URIs. So it's actually the total of all possible settings, while in the past all the other settings were actually created on a per case basis. And in that old scenario, there were still some cases that you had to use the old custom OMA URI in order to set the settings. So the settings catalog should be near 100% feature parity with what's possible on the MDM side. That's the idea behind it. And we see some interesting things happening now, because within the settings catalog we can easily search. We can now have settings which only are applicable to users compared to devices. So I think in the end the settings catalog will have some nice features which can help us to define the correct policies.
Yeah.
So.
Last time we talked about autopilot. One of the steps in autopilot, we can not handle that with a config policy. That is setting the local admin, or we can set some extra local admins within a config policy, for example. But I want to bring another discussion on the table, and that is the local admin. The user, must that be a local admin or not?
In my opinion, that's not necessary. So no.
Joost?
True.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Still least privilege.
Still least privilege, yeah. Because I see...
Maybe I can add to that. I do believe that sometimes users need local admin rights, but they shouldn't need it 24/7. And I think that's the most important thing to mention, is that there's a difference between giving somebody local admin rights or making them local admin for 24/7 for the whole year. And I think the discussion should be on that part and not whether or not a user needs it, because we as an IT, we cannot, it will always be on a per user basis that you actually determine whether that is needed or not.
Yeah, because applications is a whole other topic, but not every piece of software can be scripted, deployed through Intune. Take AutoCAD for example, one big application that can. It's hard to distribute that within Intune. So a local user needs install rights to realize that software on his laptop, and in most cases, we want to give users freedom to do with their laptops what they want to do. So that discussion about that local admin question it comes to the table many times. And if we want to give the users freedom, do we have other options as well within config policies, within app deployment, or for example, is there already a local admin, an admin password of an admin solution to give users admin rights for a specific time, like privileged identity management in Azure Active Directory?
Well, this week released the new Intune suite, where we actually have a solution in there where an administrator can define whether a user can start a certain application under admin credentials, but that still requires some admin, an admin to configure what an end user can do at that point in time. I think it's a good way forward. And of course, there are some other solutions there as well, where we provide local administrator passwords like Labs. Also, Labs for cloud is coming, of course.
It's coming, yeah.
Yeah, and there are many cases or many solutions where we can actually find an optimal mixture between productivity and security, because that's everything that we are doing on a modern workplace. We are always trying to find the right balance between security, user productivity, and how to do that in the best way.
Yeah, I can imagine if you are in a large organization, then IT team can handle and can help and so on. But if we have a small customer is on a Saturday and the service provider is probably not working 24/7, how do you do that, Eric, with some smaller customers who wants to have more and more freedom on that?
There are multiple options. One of the most common option is using a freeware tool is Make Me Admin. Then they give them a certain time of admin rights. But making a user, what Kenneth said, 24/7 admin, then we don't need to have we are not managing the workspace. So in my opinion, the solution is in compliancy. So no matter what you do with your laptop, if it isn't compliant, you cannot log in on the network. But the problem we face is that we are in the process of moving from on-premises AD with NTLM and Kerberos protocols and all the file servers and home drives to OneDrive and all OAuth and OpenID Connect and all that kind of new protocols. So our service desk is not equipped at the moment because if you're incompliant, you cannot work. That's a P1. That's a big problem. The customer is shouting. So how to fix that? Because the customer has installed something or changed something on his laptop because he's admin. For example, he disabled BitLocker. you cannot log in anymore because you're incompliant. And that's the trade-off. So we try to keep least privilege as much as possible, using Make Me Admin as a temporary solution to solve the gap. In the end, we want to solve it with compliancy, but the service desk is not equipped at the moment to fix within within a shorter time to fix just such problems, because they have not the experience how to fix that at the moment on a large scale.
Yeah. Regarding basic policies, we have some config policies. Last time we talked also about configuration manager. Now we're talking about Intune. But if I have a hybrid environment with config manager as well, what are the best practices in that area, Joost?
That's not my cup of tea. So I'm only doing
we don't have Peter in this recording.
But in the old days, we would actually use the GPOs, of course, to do the settings in Active Directory. But within Configuration Manager, we had the configuration items and the configuration baselines, which actually have similar functionality compared to what we see now in the configuration profiles, where actually the configuration items were able to set registry keys or some other stuff, and we could actually measure whether a device was compliant on that part as well. But we didn't have the mean to actually tell an environment, hey, if your device is not compliant, you don't get access to the data. And that's something we can accomplish today with the conditional access, of course.
Yeah, and if you have a hybrid environment with co-management, for example, or cloud attached, how does it call it nowadays? But you have the possibility to move the specific workloads from on-prem to Intune.
Yeah.
And then you have the possibility to make use of all the configuration policies in Intune, as well as managing other workloads in the on-prem environment.
Indeed,
so
and we can also use the compliancy from Config Manager again. But in the end, when it comes to actually blocking access to devices based on compliancy status, we always need the Azure AD, because that's where the conditional access lives.
Yeah.
And we can't do that, for example, when the computer is in the domain and trying to access, for example, a file server or do stuff there. That there might be some third-party solutions doing that, but they are that will probably be very complex to configure, because then we are talking about what was it, network access control and all kinds of that related stuff that you need to configure in that place.
For using the config manager connected to Intune, my opinion, my migration strategy should be just make a new modern workplace, forget about the config manager and build it up from scratch and no connection to each other, and team by team, and every new laptop is a modern laptop. With the new Azure AD Connect, it's easier to also make a connection hybrid, and then make every laptop modern. They can have a Kerberos token, so they can access the on-premises environment. So although I do small customers, I should never go that way. But I think there may be specific use cases, but in the Netherlands, I think just do it the other way. But that's my opinion.
I fully agree. So if you don't need that functionality, please don't start using co-management and stuff. It's better to actually build your modern workplace on top of Intune only, to say so. We still have single sign-on to AD resources, so that should be the issue as well. But I can imagine that maybe for some larger companies or maybe specific scenarios, using the hybrid approach where we use co-management could be a way to move from the old to the new modern way of managing devices. We have options there, but not the options don't make it easier necessarily. And due to that, in my opinion, some customers make wrong decisions on that part.
Let's see if we can wrap this up.
Yeah, indeed.
We have basic policies, basically for some onboarding stuff. So doing the configuration of OneDrive, Outlook, and probably some other configurations. That is mainly the things where we use the basic policies. Probably We have some OMA URIs for preview stuff that is not already in the settings catalog or in other stuff in the GUI that we can use. So we need the OMA URIs, and that we can do within the config policies.
Yeah, a good example there. I just wanted to mention that, for example, if you want to implement the sys baseline, they also provide in the baseline itself only the OMA URI settings.
Yeah.
So you either need to translate them yourself into settings catalog, or if you want to be a quick, want to be finished fast, you can actually create custom OMA URI policies where you can actually pick what's in the sys baseline one-on-one. That's also an option. Yeah.
Did I forget something?
Kenneth's Corner.
Kenneth's Corner. So, what do we have in Kenneth's Corner this time?
The thing I've heard, a good one, I think, what Eric always was saying, naming convention. I think that's a good one for Kenneth to answer to. How do you start with a good naming convention?
Yeah, well, that's actually a good question, and I wasn't prepared for that one.
That's why.
We try to make some fun. So
no, that's actually quite good. So, in my opinion, a good naming convention starts with consistency. So, in the end, you want the name of a configuration item to actually reflect to the people, to the person looking at it, what it's actually doing. So maybe your name of a configuration item should contain something telling what the configuration item is doing. So that's something I prefer. I also look at naming convention as something that that can give clearance at the moment that you're, for example, troubleshooting the device. So, for example, by going to the device into the endpoint manager or the Intune admin center, as we call it since this week again, you should actually be able to go to a device, go to the configuration profiles, and actually see what kind of config is actually applied to that device. And one thing that I'm actually always implementing in my naming convention is versioning. Because in my opinion, you should never change any config which is already live for customers, because you can enable things but can also break things. So what I always do is when I create new config, I create a copy of my old config, up the version of it, and make the changes in that configuration profile. But again, that's my way of working, and that's not a prerequisite or like a mandatory in your naming convention.
Yeah, and I heard Eric one thing to adding to your naming convention. If you are working as a managed service provider and you're working with lots of customers, that's probably good to have the customer name in the policies as well.
Yeah, and keep it consistent over all tenants, so not in one tenant. So, for example, a conditional access rule enable MFA. It looks on every customer and every exception on the MFA has the same group name, has the same of the group identifiers. Yeah. So you can recognize, no matter which customer or tenant you are looking at, you recognize that is the exception, that is the Intune rule or the conditional access rule for enabling MFA. Exactly the same for known folder move, for example. You know, it's already configured like this. But if you want to change, you can also generate the configuration policy to change over 100 tenants. So you have also to think how to change things multiple 100. Yeah. And then you have to do it the same.
Especially as a service provider, where you actually have a first line support department. It would be nice if the people working on the first line support actually know that there is like a baseline at every customer which actually works the same. And hopefully if there's an issue at one customer, if you have done your configuration correctly, you might also expect to have that at all your other customers as well. If you're being consistent within what you configure, but also, of course, consistent in the naming convention and everything used there.
Yeah. So keep it simple. That's one thing I hear.
Yeah, that's always.
I think the most secure environment you can build is actually an environment which is as simple as possible.
Yeah, there's no policies.
And Do you do a lot of configurations into the same policies, or do you create separate ones? That's one as well. So you can pinpoint it
Yeah.
easier to
Is that
one another.
pinpointing, or is that also performance-wise a thing?
No, having too much policies can make it unclear on what's being applied. So you always have to find a right optimum mixture between. But I prefer to have as much granularity as possible because in my solution and in my designs, I always work exception-based. And that actually means that by default, every user has the same configuration, but we know as consultants that there are always exceptions. And by making your configuration as granular as possible, you also know that the impact of that exception is as less as possible as well.
Yep.
And therefore, I prefer to do that in that way. But it's not a matter of being right or being wrong here. It's more that some solutions have advantages, but they also have disadvantages as well.
Yeah.
And you always have to find the right balance between that in any case.
There's one last thing, BitLocker. Where Eric was mentioning that in the in one of the first questions. It can be configured on different places.
Yeah.
What is the most preferred option where BitLocker needs to be configured to have an optimal experience for your end users?
Well, BitLock is actually quite an interesting one because, in my opinion, it should be configured in the endpoint security part of the Intune admin center. Were it not that the BitLocker settings under endpoint encryptions don't support filters yet. And actually, the whole filter thing is what makes it interesting to use the functionality, because you can then, for example, say we have BitLocker settings for all our users, but on a VM they might be different, or we don't use BitLocker or whatever.
Yeah.
And that's actually not possible now with the endpoint security. And therefore, the fallback would be to start using settings catalog in that case.
Yeah.
But this is a great example on where we prefer to use solution A, but due to some missing functionality, the filters in this case, we fall back on using the settings catalog.
And what's next? If we look at all the different places that we can put in one piece of configuration, is there a thing in the near future that everything is bringing back into one area, or will there be always multiple places?
Now, in the end, in the console there will be multiple places, but in the end it will all be settings catalog based files.
Yep.
So that's where actually the config is looking, and if you evolve in your Intune configuration, you will actually see that other tools like the security score, compliance manager, actually start looking at that config as well in order to determine that score.
Yeah.
And in that case, I would bet on start using settings catalog, because most probably those tools will actually have a look at the settings catalog on what settings are being set instead of custom OMI URI settings, for
I
example.
think there is no end. It's always evolving. It's Intune, it's endpoint manager, it's
Indeed.
config, it's a baseline. It's so what's next? I don't know, because from now it's session catalog, but I don't think we can keep that up for 3 years now. So there is no end.
No, you always have to keep your environment updated, and that's something that's really hard for customers, because they are used to do this in a project, and a project has a start and an end, but there is no end. You're jumping on a train, and you need to keep yourself updated, because, for example, also in the conditional access policies, some functionalities goes out of support, and you need to configure a new way to do the same thing. And if you don't do it, it will stop working at a certain point in time.
And we saw it last week. When customers asking for something specific, Windows will come with a specific feature update, not in the release candidate that we have, but there was a specific update. And what I want to say with that is that also on the Intune part, Eric's mentioned it already, it's evolving, and there will be features requested by customers, requested by IT admins, and so on. So there will be new stuff and probably other configuration places as well.
Indeed, yeah. So change is part of the game.
Yeah, so let's wrap this one up. This was all about the configuration policies, the basic policies within Intune. Next time we will discuss the security baselines, and after that one we will dive into the settings catalog. So 2 topics that we already touched a little bit in this recording. We will dive into that in the next few ones. So thanks for listening and viewing, and let's see if we can meet each other next time again. Thank you.
Was nice. Thanks.
Yes.